Born in 1820, Samuel Johnson was a slave who was used as a jockey by the Laird family. He won a race with a horse named Chief Mingo and got the slave name Mingo Jack. Johnson was emancipated in the 1840s. He got married, had numerous children, and worked odd jobs as a laborer. On March 6, 1886, he was arrested and charged for an assault on Angelina Herbert, a 24-year-old white woman. Johnson was taken to the lockup in Eatontown. Later that night, a crowd broke in and hung Johnson from the lockup, killing him. A trial was held to figure out who lynched Johnson. However, the trial was mostly a farce and no one was ever charged in the killing of Johnson. However, what did come out of the trial is that the clothes that Johnson was wearing the day of the attack did not match the clothes Herbert had described her attacker was wearing. Two other people later came forward claiming that they were the ones behind the attack on Herbert. In all likelihood, Samuel Johnson was murdered for a crime that he did not ever commit. So where did Samuel Johnson live? For years there has been speculation on this. Some say the house was in the center of Eatontown on Grant Avenue, a house which still stands to this day. Others say that Samuel Johnson lived south of Eatontown on what is now Highway 35. To answer this question, the first thing I looked at was a newspaper account in the Red Bank Register from March 10, 1886. It says the following: After leaving Eatontown a mile behind, the Poplar Road turns off sharp to the right, and there are but 3 houses until Mapp's sawmill is reached. One of the houses was occupied by Johnson. We can glean a lot from just this small statement. For starters, where is the Poplar Road that Johnson apparently lived on? Numerous sources say that it was what is now Highway 35, which makes sense since Highway 35 is the same road that goes through Eatontown, and this road is labeled as Poplar. But where on Highway 35 did Johnson live? This statement gives us a good idea. It says, leaving Eatontown a mile behind, the road turns sharp to the right. Sure enough, even to this day, a mile south of Eatontown, Highway 35 still turns sharply to the right near what is present-day Monmouth Mall. The statement goes on to say that Johnson's house is in between this bend and Mapp's Pond and Sawmill. But where is Mapp's Pond? Believe it or not, the remnants of the pond still exist near present-day Red Lobster. So Johnson's house would have been located somewhere in between Red Lobster and Monmouth Mall on Highway 35. As for the description of what Johnson's house looked like, another excerpt from March 10, 1886 paper describes it as follows. Johnson lived in a small, unpainted, one-story frame house at the edge of the Poplar Road. The property is owned by William Conover of Red Bank. The talk of Samuel Johnson being in the center of Eatontown on Grant Avenue has been discussed. There has even been talk of putting up a marker near that house. Is it possible that Johnson lived there at some point? The research I have found seems to indicate that there is no way that Samuel Johnson lived in the house on Grant Avenue. For starters, deed records indicate the house was not built until 1924, almost 40 years after Johnson was murdered. While deeds can sometimes be wrong and an earlier structure could have existed on that site, the topography maps that I've found seem to support the idea that there was no structure on the site at the time of Johnson's lynching in 1886. Here we see a topography map from 1956 showing the Grant Street house. However, if we go back to a map from 1900, no house is present. I wish I could say that Samuel Johnson lived in a house that is still standing on Grant Avenue, but all the research indicates that he didn't. And the house that he did live in is somewhere on Highway 35 and has long since been demolished.